Have you ever walked into a room full of people you don't know and suddenly you forget how to act like a normal human being? You start thinking, am I standing weird? What should I say? Do they think I'm awkward? And the harder you try to look natural, the more awkward you feel. But what if the problem isn't your personality? What if it's simply where your attention goes? Imagine this. You walk into a party, a meeting, or a social event where you barely know anyone. You look around and see a group of people talking and laughing. You want to join them. But then your brain starts working overtime. Should I walk over? What if they don't want me there? What if I say something stupid? What if the conversation gets quiet? So instead, you take out your phone. You pretend you're busy. Maybe you even tell yourself, I'm just not a social person. But here's the interesting part. Feeling awkward around new people doesn't automatically mean you're bad at socializing. A lot of the time, awkwardness comes from paying too much attention to yourself. You're not just having a conversation, you're also monitoring your voice, your facial expressions, your body language, your timing, and every single thing you just said. And when your brain is busy watching you, it becomes much harder to simply be present with another person. So today, we're going to change that. You don't need to become an extrovert. You don't need a list of clever conversation starters. And you definitely don't need to become the funniest or most interesting person in the room. You just need to make a few small changes in the way you approach new people. The first one is probably the most important. You are not in the spotlight as much as you think. When you make a small mistake in a social situation, it can feel huge. You say something awkward, you pronounce a word incorrectly, you laugh at the wrong moment, or maybe you suddenly run out of things to say. Inside your head, it feels like everyone noticed, and you might think about that moment for the rest of the night. But here's the problem. You're experiencing the situation from inside your own head. Other people aren't. They're thinking about their own problems, their own conversations, their own appearance, their own plans for tomorrow. Psychologists have studied something called the spotlight effect, which describes our tendency to overestimate how much other people notice our appearance and behavior. In other words, you may feel like there's a giant spotlight shining directly on you, but for everyone else, you're probably just another person in the room. So instead of telling yourself, nobody is paying attention to me, try something more realistic. Tell yourself, maybe they noticed, but they probably aren't analyzing me the way I am. That's a much easier thought to believe. The next time you walk into a room full of strangers, remind yourself, this isn't a performance. You don't have to impress everyone. You don't have to prove anything. You're simply another person having a conversation. And once you remove the pressure to perform, something interesting happens. You start becoming more natural. Which brings us to the second shift. Stop asking, how do I look? And start asking, who is this person? When we're nervous around new people, our attention often turns inward. Am I talking too fast? Does my voice sound weird? Am I smiling enough? Where should I put my hands? Was that joke stupid? The more you focus on yourself, the more self-conscious you can become. So try flipping the direction of your attention. Instead of asking, how can I make this person like me? Ask, what can I learn about this person? Imagine you're meeting a new coworker. You don't need to think of an impressive story about yourself. You can simply ask, so what do you do here? They might say, I just joined the marketing team. Now you don't need to come up with the perfect response. Just be curious. Oh, nice. Did you work in marketing before this? That's it. You're not performing, you're exploring. And that difference matters. When you focus on discovering something about another person, you have less mental energy available for constantly judging yourself. Try this the next time you meet someone new. Don't make your goal, I need to make a great impression. Make your goal, I want to find one thing I'm genuinely curious about. Just one thing. You might be surprised by how much easier conversation becomes when you stop trying to control how you appear. But there's another trap that makes awkwardness even worse, trying too hard to avoid awkward moments. Think about what happens when a conversation suddenly goes quiet. You ask a question, the other person gives a short answer, then there's silence, and immediately your brain says, oh no, this is awkward. So you panic,
You say something random, you talk too much, you ask another question before they've even finished answering, and somehow the situation feels even more awkward. This is why one of the most useful skills in social situations is learning to tolerate small moments of awkwardness. Don't make your goal, I must never be awkward. Make your goal, if this gets a little awkward, I can stay calm and keep going. For example, imagine you ask someone, what do you usually do on weekends? And they say, not much, I mostly stay home.
Then there's a short pause. That's okay. You could simply ask, fair enough. Do you usually watch movies, play games, or just relax? Or you could talk about something related to the situation you're already in. You don't have to rescue every silence. People who seem socially comfortable aren't people who never experience awkward moments. They've simply learned that an awkward moment isn't a disaster. Think about one of your closest friends. You can probably sit in silence with them without immediately feeling like something is wrong. Why? Because you don't interpret silence as evidence that the relationship is failing. With new people, you don't have that comfort yet, and that's normal. Comfort takes time. So don't demand instant connection from every conversation. Let a conversation be an ordinary conversation. It doesn't have to become a friendship. It doesn't have to be memorable. It doesn't even have to go perfectly. And that leads to the next shift. Stop trying to impress people. Start trying to make them feel comfortable. A lot of people think they need to be smart, funny, confident, or extremely interesting when meeting someone new. But that goal can create even more pressure, because now you're constantly asking, was that interesting enough? Did they laugh? Did I sound confident? Do they like me? Instead, try focusing on warmth. You don't have to be the most entertaining person in the room. You just need to show that you're interested in the person you're talking to. Look at them when they're speaking. Actually listen. Ask a follow-up question. React naturally. Smile when something is genuinely funny, and don't be afraid to show curiosity. For example, instead of trying to tell an amazing story about yourself, you could ask, how do you know everyone here? Maybe they say, we all went to college together. You could respond, oh, nice. Were you all in the same class? That's a simple question, nothing impressive, but that's exactly the point. Natural conversations are usually built from simple moments. You don't need a perfect line. You need attention. And here's something worth thinking about. The next time you're talking to someone new, ask yourself afterward, was I paying attention to them, or was I mostly thinking about myself? You don't need to judge your answer, just notice it, because awareness is the first step toward changing the pattern. And finally, there's something you can't think your way out of. You have to practice. If you constantly avoid situations that make you feel awkward, your brain doesn't get many opportunities to learn that those situations are actually manageable. You don't need to throw yourself into a huge party and force yourself to talk to 20 strangers. Start much smaller. Ask a coworker a question that isn't about work. Say a few words to someone sitting next to you. Make small talk with someone at a class or event. If you're at a social gathering, don't make the goal, I have to meet 5 new people. Make the goal, I'll talk to one person. That's enough. The goal isn't to have a perfect conversation. The goal is to collect real experiences. You want your brain to gradually learn, I can talk to someone I don't know. I might feel nervous, and that's okay. There might be silence. The conversation might not go anywhere, and I can handle all of that. That's a much more realistic form of confidence. Confidence isn't, everyone is going to like me. Confidence is, whatever happens, I can handle it. So, let's bring everything together. If you often feel awkward around new people, remember these 4 ideas. First, you're probably not under as much of a spotlight as you think. Second, shift your attention from how am I coming across to who is this person? Third, stop treating every awkward moment like an emergency. And fourth, get comfortable through small, repeated interactions instead of waiting until you magically feel confident. And if you want one thing to practice today, make it this. The next time you meet someone new, don't try to impress them. Find one thing you're genuinely curious about, then ask about it. That's all.
One question, one conversation, one small step. Because becoming more comfortable around people isn't about suddenly becoming a completely different person. It's about slowly proving to yourself that you don't have to be perfect to connect with someone. And if you enjoy practical videos about confidence, communication, and understanding your own behavior, consider subscribing. The goal isn't to turn you into someone you're not, it's to help you feel more comfortable being yourself. But here's the bigger question. What if your problem isn't that you don't know how to talk to people? What if the real problem is that you're constantly worried about how other people are judging you? And what happens when you stop trying to prove your worth in every conversation? That's where things get really interesting, because sometimes becoming more confident isn't about learning to say more, it's about learning to care a little less about how you look in someone else's eyes. And that's something we'll explore next.